Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, Adjusting the Ranks edition. I'm Ian Hartitz. Joining me, as always, the one, the only, Dwayne, the Rock McFarland. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's my favorite time of the year, utilization time, Ian.
Oh, baby.
Trying to pick up tidbits and what we can. Some of it's hard. Like some of you get in there, you start studying it, and you figure you're like, I've been looking at this team for 30 minutes. I really don't think there's anything here. So that actually does happen sometimes. And I look up, I'm like, oh my God, I just spent 25 or 30 minutes on this one team. I'm not going to lie. It happened like twice this morning. So
2 weeks of preseason action down. As always, less concerned with the actual performance, although we do pay attention to the big time performers as well. But Dwayne, for every Isaiah Likely that actually turns out to be something, we do have about 10 Jesper Horsted scoring 3 touchdowns in a preseason game that we really never talk about again. So would just keep that in mind throughout here. Hey man,
I love it. I love it.
Dude had himself a hell of a preseason week 3 game last year. People don't forget, Dwayne. But yeah, so again, want to go through these. You guys can catch all of our updated rankings with our new PFF Plus service. We are trying to help you draft. And, Dwayne, we were talking about at the end of last episode, like truly to have some of you guys send in the drafts you've done using our draft strategy assist guide, and legit like them. The drafts look like exactly what Dwayne and I have kind of put together ourselves. Just awesome to see. So again, check that out. New PFF app is available out there. You can get all that information at your fingertips. If you are looking for myself, Dwayne, Nathan Yonke, Kevin Cole, our updated ranks, our analysis behind every pick, and you just want the PFF help for your drafts, that is where to go. Again, PFF Plus, check out the new PFF app, wherever you download apps, I guess your phone usually. So good times there. Dwayne, let's get into it. These are basically the 14 big ranking adjustments from the preseason. Just real quick, shout out Nathan Yonke. As always, absolutely crushing the preseason takeaway game. If you're looking for immediate snap rates, fantasy football takeaways, anything like that, make sure you follow Nathan at PFF Nathan Yonke on Twitter. He gets you going in a hurry. So, Dwayne, big news, Washington backfield, even more of a mess. Like the Antonio Gibson stock watch is just cratering recently. It's like it can't get even worse, but now he's a kick returner. Now Brian Robinson is actually starting ahead of him in a football game. Yeah, he had the pass down work, but that was also with J.D. McKissic out of the lineup. This really does look like not just a full-blown committee, but looks like it has the potential. Like for me, Dwayne, I haven't been doing this quite as long as you, but like the most disgusting backfield I can remember was like 2019 Buccaneers when we had Rojo, Peyton Barber, and Dario Gumbawale. Like no one could even hit 40% snaps during a week. This wasn't even like a 50%, 30-20. They were legit almost 33 every single week. That seems to be where we're getting here. Do we straight up take Brian Robinson over Antonio Gibson at this point, Dwayne? Or is the answer like just no? My goodness, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I think we do have to start taking Robinson over Gibson. I've still got to adjust my ranks. Like I just got through this morning going through all the utilization stuff, but like, obviously getting another data point, we don't want to overreact too much in any 1 week. But at the same time, like at a minimum, they should be going like right next to each other. We're going to have to see next week, like what happens when JD McKissic and Brian Robinson play. Hopefully they both play, because then like we might see, like, who knows when Antonio Gibson might have gotten into this game, right? If it hadn't been for taking on the passing down work with McKissic out, like really, it might've been like the 5th or 6th drive. We don't really know. And if that's the case, that really means it's just Brian Robinson playing the Antonio Gibson role last year, and JD McKissic keeps on playing the JD McKissic role. And then, really you need an injury for Antonio Gibson to be worth anything. Yeah. Well, I think the best news for Gibson would be an injury to McKissic, right? In PPR formats, right? Then you immediately pick up that value. You probably pick up a few of the carries as well. That's probably the easiest path for Antonio Gibson to return any sort of value. But man, I was just looking at the ADP over on FFPC. Like, dude, Brian Robinson was going as high as round 7 after this news. And so like he's typically settling in between round 8 and 10. And I think that's fair when you look at all the other running backs going into that range. I think I'd be fine with him in round 9 or 10. But to your point, you just have to realize like it could be really nasty. Like this could still be a true 3-way committee. I think the way ADP is reacting is kind of the way we started off, which is, I think you kind of got to consider Robinson to be the starter. But at the end of the day, we could still have 3 players involved.
I think that's the major takeaway here. Like, obviously it's terrible for Gibson, but it's not a screaming, it's obviously better for Robinson than what we thought, but he's not all of a sudden like who we wanted Antonio Gibson to be. This is still a full-fledged 3-back committee. And I do think it's arguably, okay, if we take away McKissic, Gibson now, he could flirt with like RB2 value, but I think the upside RB1 days like are completely over. Like what we saw over the last 5 weeks of last season, we're not getting that. Brian Robinson is legitimately going to lead the way on early downs, Dwayne. And I did do my rankings adjustments yesterday. I do have Robinson one spot ahead of Antonio Gibson. My RB40, RB41 overall, I have them. Have them 115th and 116th overall. So about round 9, round 10, that would be where I'm taking them. But round 7 for Robinson, man, that's a little steep for me. And honestly, when I look at Robinson and Gibson now, I'm having like the same conversation as, when these guys were, or at least when Gibson and Jacobs and kind of Mitchell were like in the mid-20s. Like, are we sure we want Robinson and Gibson when I do think they're 2 injuries away from being someone we're just thrilled about having? Do we really want to take them, Dwayne, over guys like Michael Carter, Darrell Henderson, Alexander Madison, Jamal Williams, Khalil Herbert, where, okay, who are we going to take on a week-by-week basis? Probably the Washington guys, but man, I think all those dudes are only 1 injury away from having a much higher ceiling than either Robinson or Gibson.
Yeah, and they're going to go after Robinson now, right?
That's why I'm not too worried about it, but
at the same time, I mean, it's a good point because that means that the pick that, other folks are going to now be spending on Robinson, to get him in round 8 or 9, you could still be taking a receiver. I mean, if he's going in round 7, there's no way I'm taking Brian Robinson over Chase Edmonds. Like, no way, ever. Like, I will never do that. So yeah, I'm with you. I think honestly, the ADP is probably, I think it's going to end up being fine on Robinson. Like I said, it'll probably settle in like round 8, 9, and 10, which I get it why people want to do it, but I'm with you. It's not like all of a sudden he's going to be my primary target. I still think he needs, to your point, even though he could now be the starter, he still needs 2 injuries to really, unlock any sort of huge potential, because JD McKissic has the passing down work. And if JD McKissic gets hurt, then Antonio Gibson's going to take over that work. And plus, like, what if Brian Robinson fumbles in week 1? Like, this coaching staff have shown us like they're willing just to put somebody right into the doghouse. By week 5, we could be going, woo, okay, great. Antonio Gibson's now the lead back again. I think it's quite a mess.
Let the record show that I had Antonio Gibson on my phase list August 19th before we saw Brian Robinson get the start. Dwayne, I'm not going to go on a massive victory lap tour here. I know a lot of people weren't exactly high on him, but
to be fair, I think we've probably had him on the fades list since like Brian Robinson was drafted.
Exactly, man. So
yeah.
Don't hate the player, hate the ADP. First of, a million times we said that on this podcast, but it still holds true. A quality handcuff is residing in Chicago, though, Dwayne. I mentioned before, but Khalil Herbert, back-to-back weeks playing every single snap alongside Justin Fields. And The Athletic had an article come out real helpful. I love when they go through just every team, basically, and get one kind of fantasy football-minded takeaway from all their awesome beat reporters. And once again, man, more chatter that just based on what they're seeing in practice, it does look like that Herbert is also going to have a role in this offense. I could see it being similar to Jamal Williams, where we're not, necessarily getting the sort of massive touch workload that we ever feel that good about putting the guy in the flex, other than AJ Dillon and Kareem Hunt. The idea of a number 2 running back having standalone value, I think there's certainly at least layers to that idea, or levels, I should say. But at a minimum, Dwayne, Khalil Herbert, someone that, again, you just look at where he's going relative to guys like Alexander Madison, and we're seeing a running back with 3 down handcuff upside, just continuing to go outside the top 50 or so. So are you ready to kind of put Herbert ahead of some of these rookies, the Rashad Whites, Isaiah Spillers, Tyrion Davis Prices of the world? Have you already gotten to that point?
Yeah, I already moved him ahead of several of those last week, based off of the first wave of preseason games. And so now, I was just looking at it, before the show, like how much further would I move him up? Like, I've got him ahead of Rashad White. I've got him ahead of Isaiah Spiller. I've got him dead even with Jamal Williams, honestly. Yeah. The main thing is, like, he's playing an every down role right now with David Montgomery out. Like, they're not taking him off the field at all. If you look at him, and it is the same for both games. I believe week 1, it might have been 3 drives, but this last week it was 2 drives with the starters. He handled all of it, all the passing down, all the short down and distance, everything. Now, 2 weeks in a row, he's been terrible in pass pro. So this week he had a 16.9 PFF pass blocking grade. Last week it was a little bit better than that, but it was also terrible. So it's something he's going to have to work on. Like, he's definitely going to have to improve his pass blocking skills to hang on to that role, which may be a good thing for Montgomery, right? That may mean that Montgomery, no matter what, is just going to be the passing down back as long as he's healthy. And then maybe Khalil Herbert just carves away at some of the early down work, even though we've talked about how replaceable Montgomery, is. he's a lot better whenever you think about, him as far as a pass blocker than what we get with Herbert. But it'll be interesting to see how much can Herbert carve out. I think, maybe 30-40% is definitely in play, but the contingency upside is huge because they've just all they've shown us so far is that if Montgomery goes down, it is all Khalil Herbert.
Again, still trying to compare the underdog ADPs, which are being updated far faster, and I just think more sharply than a lot of the other resources. But August 23rd, guys, we can't wait much longer to go exactly to the home league ADPs and expect them to catch up. So using the Fantasy Pros ADP, just consensus tool, David Montgomery, RB 17, which, yeah, that's high for me, but the number 34 player overall thing is what I truly believe to be asinine. I have not been in a draft where he's really going before round 4, round 5 in recent memory. But even with that said, Dwayne, I don't want him in round 5. Again, this comes back to why we love taking the quarterbacks in rounds 5 and 6 so much is because, yeah, we got some studs there that we want from the skill position rooms. When Kittle and Waller fall to that point, when Amon-Ra St. Brown is there, that's obviously an auto pick. But more than anything, man, I just think that rounds 5 through 7, that's our RB dead zone this year. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as far as Herbert goes, he is slightly on the rise in ADP, but you can still get him in round 11 and 12 pretty much over the last 3 days over on the FFPC. That's about where he's at. And so again, that's in a sharp league. You're going to get him later than that in your home league as far as Herbert goes.
Yeah, man, I know you've been in some of these more home league type drafts, Dwayne. You look at your roster at the end, and you get just all 6 of your late round RB targets on the same squad. Always a great day to be great when that happens. Seattle tight ends. This is another ADP thing that I feel obligated to bring up, but I feel silly for saying it, and maybe you guys think I am too. But don't shoot the messenger here. Noah Fant, the tight end 15. Somehow, man, are people just blind? No offense to blind people, but man, I don't know what we're doing here with Noah Fant at this point. It never was a good situation for him in Seattle, and we're just getting more and more reinforcement that he's going to be in a committee. Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, and Will Dissly all maintained heavy involvement with the Seahawks starters in week 2. That's right. Not just Fant and Dissly, Dwayne. We got to get Colby Parkinson plenty involved in this offense as well. David Njoku, Irv Smith, Gerald Everett, all these guys have lower ADP. I mean, hell, Dwayne, this morning I put freaking Isaiah Likely one spot behind Noah Fant, and I really had to think about it. That's where we are with Noah Fant at this point. I think the answer is just no. Don't draft any of these Seattle tight ends, and if you agree, we can just move on.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Only 50% route participation this week. We already discussed where he was last week. You cannot draft. You can't. There's no way you're going to be able to start Noah Fant. Just not going to happen.
Here's another somewhat questionable tight end situation. So on the one hand, Kolkamet, he got 3 targets and just 7 snaps during the Bears week 2 matchup against the Seahawks. On the other hand, here's what we had out of the tight ends with the first team offense. Again, shout out Nathan Yonke for providing these numbers ASAP Rocky all the time. Kmet had 7 snaps and 5 routes. James O'Shaughnessy had 5 snaps, 4 routes. Chase Allen, 2 snaps, 2 routes. Ryan Griffin, their veteran backup tight end, hasn't played yet this preseason. So I don't think Chase Allen is going to make this, a 4 tight end committee, but we could see Griffin actually coming in and playing just like a James O'Shaughnessy-esque role, man. Just like David Montgomery, we're looking at an offense with new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy coming from Green Bay. And just like we're seeing with Albert O, man, coming from the LaFleur pipeline, these guys are comfortable using multiple tight ends. So for me, Kolkamet, and Albert O, I'm not out on any player, any price. I don't believe in a do not draft list. You can always have a draft long enough with wonky enough scoring settings where every single player becomes relevant at some point. But man, to still see Kmet getting the benefit of doubt, ADP tight end 13, it's almost like Dalton Schultz for me. Dwayne, I don't disagree with him necessarily being a tight end 13, but it's the fact that he's going 30 to 50 picks ahead of David Njoku, Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee. I think it's a big tier, and I'm not going to go out of my way to take Kmet at the top of it.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I was making sure my dogs were done barking. They were going freaking bananas. Somebody
they don't like Kmet either.
They don't like him. But no, and this is something that you talked about way earlier in the offseason. Like, hey, is this coaching staff going to bring over this rotation with them that we saw in Green Bay as far as, the offensive coordinator with Luke Getsy? I think that's just what we're seeing, right? We're seeing it in Denver, the same thing with Albert O, and it seems they're very intent on just having multiple guys involved. And so look, Kmet, to your point, he's fine. The tight end he's going at, But he's definitely not somebody that like I'm going to be reaching for. I don't think we're going to have any shot for him to be where we were last year. I don't want to say any shot, but at least to begin the year. Like he's a guy that maybe if things warm up, you can pick him up later in the year. But right now, no, it doesn't look like he's going to have a shot at that 70 to 80% route participation like what we saw down the stretch last season, which just made him a guy, that we were often talking about, on the pod.
Yeah, he's actually going tight end 11 over underdog now. I mean, running backs going around him like Melvin Gordon, Darrell Henderson, Nyheim Hines. I'm looking elsewhere at that point in the draft. Big injury here. Second round Patriots wide receiver Tyquan Thornton suffered a broken collarbone. He'll be might not have been broken. I know it's a collarbone injury. He'll be sidelined until at least October. Was pushing for a potential spot in 3 wide receiver sets. Presumably, Dwayne, we got Jacoby Myers in there. I think Devontae Parker is there. Now it seems like it's more of a toss-up than ever between Nelson Agler and Kendrick Bourne, which I know is surprising people. But Kendrick Bourne didn't play last week because he got an in-house suspension after getting in a fight with practice. You read some of the stuff that Patriots beat reporters have just said about Bourne, like him just kind of falling out of favor in Mac Jones's pecking order. And it's been a surprise because, my goodness, like, you look at what Bourne did on his touches last year. Like when I look at, I think he was like 3rd in expected fantasy points, like fantasy points above expectation, I should say, last year. It's like Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and Kendrick Bourne. Like he really made the most out of his opportunities. And at least for a portion of this offseason, he was a trendy last round pick accordingly. Now, though, not even sure if he's going to be in 3 wide receiver sets. Does losing Thornton here, just having Bourne kind of falling out of favor, perhaps, are you even stronger on Myers or Parker? Do you even have a read on this New England passing game in general at this point, Dwayne?
Yeah, it's all Jacoby Myers for me. I'm fine if you want to take Parker, but like he kind of rotated in and out this last week with the starters. Like he wasn't out there. He wasn't out there for even 90% of the routes. It was 90% of the routes went to Agler, 80% of the routes went to Jacoby Myers, and then you had Parker rotating in and out with Thornton. And we don't know for sure. Like, if Thornton had kept playing, like, might he have had even less routes? So yeah, it's a situation where those are the main 2 that I'm really, after is, Jacoby. Well, the main one I'm after is Jacoby Myers. Hunter Henry, I'm still fine drafting. He didn't play this last weekend. Jonnu Smith was out there for 90% of the routes with Hunter Henry out. So, but still that kind of worries me even at the tight end spot. Like, are they going to start rotating Jonnu Smith in more this year? Last year, Hunter Henry got pretty lucky, right? Jonnu hardly played at all. So the main passing weapon that I'm really interested in is just Jacoby Myers. If I were to pick a second one, it would still be Devontae Parker, even though he rotated in and out a little bit more than what we would hope for this past weekend. Again, we don't always know the reasoning behind these things in preseason. Coaches could just want to make sure they get certain looks, right, with the receiver, with the starting quarterback. And so that can take away snaps from one player or the other. Doesn't mean Devontae Parker is not a starter, though.
All right, Dwayne, we have a veteran, former first-round pick, a guy that's had a couple really good seasons under his belt before having to change offenses, though. Maybe didn't get the best out of him last year, a little bit of an uncertain situation, but could have a full-time role. I'm not talking about Juju, man. I'm talking about Nelson Agler. You said it, 90% snap rate, route rate, leading the way.
Rate.
Yeah, good job, Ian. Patriots beat reporters saying that he's emerged as the favorite target. I'm not putting a ton of stock into what's been happening in practice necessarily, but it is one of these things, Dwayne, where, again, I think if we took these New England receivers, we stripped their names away and we just kind of looked at their past production, what their salary is, and kind of what like their preseason usage has been, I think some people would accidentally rank Agler number 1 if we didn't know it was him. Let's remind people, guys had some horrific drops over the years. We've all seen the dropping babies meme. It's funny. It's a good time. We can laugh at that. In 2017 with the Eagles, he was a legit yards after the catch, a really good weapon on that offense. And then 2020 with the Raiders, I mean, he emerged as Derek Carr's number 1 pass game option. He had almost 900 yards, 8 touchdowns on the year, made some legitimately really good plays. I don't even want to use a last round pick on Agler or Dwayne, but if we come out here, if we're talking, on Sunday night after week 1, and we're still seeing Agler, out there getting 90% of the routes, he's someone that I think we could actually see on those, week 2 waiver wire reports in a hurry.
Yeah. The main thing for Agler is we just need him to not be like running gassers all day. Like right. That was the problem last year. He was out there, he was on the field all the time with Mac Jones, but all he did was run go routes, right? And then you had Kendrick Bourne working the underneath kind of schemey stuff. Then you had Jacoby Myers really working the slot. He was the guy, that's going to beat man coverage, can settle down inside the zone, coverages and get you the first down. So I still feel like Agler is going to be on the outside looking in. But to your point, if you just took you took the nameplates away, right? And all you were looking at, are the data points you mentioned. I think it could be easy to confuse Agler with Devontae Parker. And, we could decide like after week 2 that, it was really Agler all along, not Devontae Parker. It is New England. They're historically known for throwing us curveballs. They're also historically known for not really being able to evaluate wide receivers. So maybe we just shouldn't care. And we should the only answer is Jacoby Myers really for me in drafts.
I do agree that all this does keep pointing the arrow right back to Jacoby Myers. All right. I went out with lovely Mrs. Future Tits on Friday night. I didn't get a chance to watch many of the, games and live action. And I wake up Saturday morning and, man, I have never seen the Damien Pierce hype explode like it did for a player that just didn't even play. And I get it. It's better to not play because you're a resting starter, seemingly like Damien Pierce was, for him to go out. But my goodness, Dwayne, this is like Isaiah Pacheco on steroids, like here with the amount of love that Damien Pierce is getting. I am terrified that because Pierce and Pacheco could have like these potentially really good rookie years, like everything's been going their way, that it's just going to cause us to fall in love with every single day 3 size speed running back here for the next like decade. Because I brought this stat up before, man, but only 5 running backs not drafted in the top 3 rounds have finished as a top 24 fantasy football scorer as a rookie over the past decade. 2012, Alfred Morris. 2013, Zach Stacy. 2016, Jordan Howard. 2018, Philip Lindsay. Most recently, 2020, James Robinson. Dwayne, I moved Pierce up to my RB34. You were on this before I was. Fair play to you. Good job, buddy. Now, the question is, how much are we really getting behind him? Because, yes, it does seem like at this point, if we had to guess, Pierce would probably be in that backfield to start week 1. With that said, I could still certainly see Dario Gubawale annoyingly stealing the pass down work. I don't think Rex Burkhead is going anywhere. I'm praying that Marlon Mack isn't going to make us a 4-back committee, but I still do think there's going to be 3 running backs somewhat involved, at least early on in the season. So what have you made of the Dameon Pierce rocket ship? And I guess, are you willing to kind of chase this rising ADP?
Yeah, I am. And the reason why is because that backfield behind him really isn't that good. Right. So like, I get it.
I heard the names I just mentioned.
I know. And so and so it comes down to you're getting a young talent with a very weak backfield. And now the coach, decides that they're not going to play Dameon Pierce because they like what he did, in practice and in week 1 of the preseason, even though against the backups, like he looked really good. He did good in pass pro. He obviously looked good on the ground. This is a guy that really played, was good in the receiving game in college as well. So, he also has that all-around profile we like. Now, he was never able to truly take over any sort of major workload, for the Florida Gators when he was in college. It was much more of a limited, sample size that we were dealing with. And he never became like a full-time starter. But at the end of the day, like the depth chart is just so weak. And Burkhead's old, man. He's not just, a guy that we don't think is that great. Like, I mean, he's been a pro. He's like way better than me. But at the end of the day, I mean, when we look at Rex Burkhead, he's 32 years old going into this season.
Look at him. He's old.
Yeah. Now Burkhead, last night, or not last night, the night before in that game, or was it Friday? Sorry, Friday night, whatever night it was, he handled all the passing down duties. Marlon Mack was really just the early down back. Like, so here's my thought, like, just forget Marlon Mack. Just don't even draft him anymore. There's no point. You don't want the early down grinder on a team that's going to trail all the time anyway. And now he's probably behind Pierce. So Marlon Mack is out of the plans. Burkhead, you could at least make an argument that like they're going to trail all the time and he could still be the passing down back. And if that's the case, that will mean even though Pierce is probably past Marlon Mack on the depth chart, like he's probably not going to be able to pay off his ADP because again, we don't really want the early down back, on an offense that's going to be trailing all the time. And so I would love to see both of them play next week. Who knows what they'll do. They may rest. If they rest Pierce again and they play the other two again, it's like, that's still a positive for Pierce, but I would like to see Pierce and Burkhead together for like 3 drives so we can see, does Pierce get any of the passing down work? And if we saw that, plus the other data points we have, like I would be all in. I'm kind of with you right now. Like I've been a little bit more reserved. Like I have him at, I moved him up last week to RB 32. I think I had him at like 36 before that. So I moved him up 4 spots. But if you look at him over on the FFPC, thanks Fantasy Mojo, dude, it's like a freaking hockey stick. Like it's up and to the right. Like the guy has shot up all the way. Like he's been getting taken in round 6, 3 times in the last 3 days, but he's mostly a round 7 pick. And so that's where you're going to have to settle in, right? We're talking about Chase Edmonds. We're talking about Kareem Hunt. We're talking about Tony Pollard sometimes slides into round 7. We're talking about Cordarrelle Patterson goes in round 8. I think that's the right profile, like if I were to move him up again, that's probably the tier I would put him into, because we don't know for sure he's going to have the passing down work, but he could be, right, that explosive guy that can work in the passing down. Whether the team gives it to him or not, like, we don't know. So I get it. Like, I think from an archetype standpoint, like, if that's where he would fit, but we're making a big assumption right now that he's going to take that passing down work, because if he doesn't, it's going to be really hard, man, for him to score a lot of points on an offense that may not be very good.
Yeah, if he's going to be flying past that tier, I will happily tip my cap and not be drafting him there over Underdog Fantasy, the RB 31. Dwayne, I thought I was kind of catching up on this. All right, I guess not enough. I would still certainly take Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds, and Cordero Patterson much later at better value.
He's RB 29 right now over the last 3 days on FFPC.
Sheesh. Would you take him over the Patriots backs?
I actually moved him ahead of Stevenson last week.
Wow.
I have him I have him 1 pick ahead of Josh Jacobs and two ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. Look, they're all committees, right? And so, like, I'm just looking for the one that I think I put the one at the top of the tier that I thought had the best chance to actually take over their backfield. Like, I know Josh Jacobs is not going to get to, because we know how Josh McDaniels is, right? Yeah. I know Ramondre Stevenson is not going to get to. As much as people want it, it ain't happening, folks. It's not happening in New England, right? I get it. Never say never, but if I got to put a chip down, like, it's not a good shot. It's happening. You got Damien Harris there as well. Well, I don't know if we have Singletary on the list. We'll have to talk about him in a minute, but that's about the range, for me. But I've still got him behind Hunt, Edmonds, Cook, all those guys. I think you can make an argument at this point to take him over James Cook. Like, I'm going to have to deal with myself here on James Cook. I know we'll get to that one again in a minute, but I don't know what I'm going to do with James Cook. How far am I pushing him down?
I do have Pierce 2 spots ahead of James Cook now. Still taking the.
And I think that's fair.
Still taking the New England guys just ahead. Funny. Have you seen the Fantasy Gazette Twitter account, Dwayne? The satire fantasy. It's a satire fantasy football account. So I know not everyone's cup of tea when people are just spewing out nonsense, but I find it pretty hilarious sometimes. And they had a picture of Ramondre Stevenson, and it's is there a new RB1 in New England? And the quote is, Ramondre Stevenson received first team reps every time Damien Harris got subbed out. And the amount of people that just like were kind of eating into this and not even reading the quote. You people are so thirsty for any good Ramondre Stevenson news. Hey, it might happen, but keep an eye on Dameon Pierce as well. That's all I'm saying. Moving on to Buffalo. We got some things to talk about here. First of all, though, Dwayne, Isaiah McKenzie just staying absolutely cheap as hell. When we do look at Underdog, wide receiver 64, 142 ADP. I'm sure you got some FFPC numbers for me in a second, Dwayne. I know he's rising, but it's still one of these guys that in a lot of normal drafts, wide receiver 79? Fantasy Pros consensus, that's just madness to me. And you look at the multiple sources, and he's actually going in the mid-70s, regardless of websites. So he got the rest in week 1. He played with the starters in week 2, and even got some outside wide receiver snaps, man. Like I saw in that same Athletic article, some murmurs that, hey, with the way Shakir is playing, they might feel good enough to even try to see if Jamison Crowder can fetch them a late round pick here coming up. So in an offseason where it seems like the Buffalo Bills have really stressed the yards after the catch ability all offseason long, McKenzie gives them the best chance of doing that. How high is too high on McKenzie, Dwayne? Like, I just want to keep on beating ADP with them. He is one of my top sleepers in the article I had come out on PFF.com. Like, just if you got any more McKenzie propaganda for me, great, man. There hasn't been a single thing go wrong for this guy in the last 2 months. I'm knocking on wood as I say it, but my goodness, man, like it's non-zero chance that he just outproduces like Gabriel Davis, who's going, as we know, in the 5th round.
Again, like just one of these things that, we say sometimes the consistent drumbeat, following the breadcrumbs, like whatever you want to say, like every little data, every little piece of breadcrumb that we pick up, for Isaiah McKenzie, it's like we look up and we're just closer, like to the center of like being a major part of the Bills offense. First it was the coaching staff early in minicamp saying that like, he was really going to battle to be, the starting slot receiver. Then you had the coach coming out and saying basically, yeah, he's adjusting to being the starting slot receiver. Then we see in week 1 of the preseason, he rests with the starters. Then this week he starts in the slot. And to your point, gets to move all over the formation, gets to play outside. Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie over at FFPC is now up to a round 13 pick. He was a round 14 pick last week, but still, that's a value. Like getting him in round 13, absolutely love taking McKenzie in that range in any draft that I'm in.
Isaiah McKenzie or Skyy Moore?
I'm still taking Skyy Moore, but again, like you can get both easily, right? Where Skyy Moore goes round 9 or 10 still.
Okay, who do you think scores more fantasy points this year? I hear you in terms of ADP. I think it's McKenzie.
Well, I think if you had to pick the floor right now, it'd be McKenzie. But if I had to pick a ceiling, I would still say that, if things go right, more ceiling is there.
Wow, bro. You don't think McKenzie can beat out Stephon Diggs? Hater.
Well, that's too many breadcrumbs.
It was a joke. It was a joke, everyone. Please don't roast me for that one. Okay.
That's going to go on social. Just so you know.
Second part of the Bills equation are these running backs. I think I mentioned this during our team preview series, but over the last 2 seasons, in terms of total backfield expected points per game, the bottom 5 offenses are the Jaguars, the Giants, the Texans. Yeah, sure. They suck. But then the Bills and Ravens, that's the impact that a high rushing quarterback can have on these offenses, particularly when you're an offense that's happy to really spread out the wealth between 2 or 3 running backs. We always say we can really live with 2 running back committees, but when 3 or 4 get involved, it gets awfully complicated awfully quickly in fantasy football land. When you have a rushing quarterback there, man, I'm almost tempted just to kind of add them as a member of the committee. I'm not trying to do the Lamar, Josh Allen running back slander. I hate people that do that, but just in terms of, it's true. I mean, in terms of just their rush attempts compared to pocket passers, they are eating into a larger chunk of that just team rush attempt share pie. So with that in mind, we have seen Singletary, Dwayne, working exclusively with the first team offense. With that said, I'm not convinced that he's just going to all of a sudden keep that same sort of every down role we saw at the end of last season, because James Cook, drafted him round 2 for a reason. Yeah, we've heard some whispers of pass blocking concerns, but still certainly seems like someone they can get out there for a handful of obvious pass first situations per game. And also with Zach Moss not going away at all. And in fact, impressing a lot at camp, apparently just far more healthy than last year. There's a good chance that Singletary, man, is just kind of stuck in that Antonio Gibson role where, yeah, he might lead the team in touches, he might lead the team in yards, but he's not going to be getting the goal line attempts, and he's probably not going to be getting most of the receptions either. Are you really, for me, this Bills preseason usage, I'm okay taking Singletary ahead of Cook now, especially in non-PPR, non-full PPR, I should say. But again, it's more like Washington for me. We're I just don't want any of these Buffalo running backs unless they're really going to fall to me.
Yeah, it's one of these situations where it's more like you're moving the other guy down, not moving Singletary up, So it's I am going to move James Cook down. He is going to be behind Singletary. I'm with you. I don't think there's a scenario where all of a sudden, look, I don't want to say there's not a scenario, right? There's obviously, we did see this with Singletary at the end of the year last year. He was an every down back, but he was not good in the passing game. So even if he starts the season, right, and we come out and we're like, oh, wow, 70%, snap share, week 1, week 2, week 3. My guess is that eventually over the course of the season, right, Cook starts to take away, some of that. That would be my thought process. Now, we've still got a couple of weeks, here to figure all that out, before the season starts, but obviously people are drafting right now. So I think you do have to take Singletary ahead of Cook. There is some chance that he's really the every down back, but I'm leaning more like you are. I think this will end up being a committee, and just having Moss even just competing at this point, it just makes it that much, more nasty, just like what we talked about, with, the Commanders. So yeah, with Cook, I'm going to continue to buy Cook though on the dip. He is sliding, he slid, he slid around after last week. Maybe he slides another round now, after this week's news. And we just have to remember again, you had James Cook out there, with starters still. You had, Zach Moss out there pretty much still with starters. Josh Allen was gone. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not part of the rotation, right? Some people immediately read it as, oh, that first drive, it was Singletary. He gets 100% of the work. You have to be careful with that kind of thing.
Yeah. Again, it's new information that we didn't have before. Of course, we're going to consider it. Does have to be a little bit grain of salt here with some of the pecking orders, particularly some of the snaps we'll get to in Kansas City in a second. Before that, Dwayne, another poor data point for your guy, Albert O. We still haven't seen Greg Dulcich out there. That's been the most surprising thing, man. If Dulcich had just been taking Albert O's receiving snaps, I could have seen it. But no, he's actually been missing most of this time with a hamstring injury. I do believe he's back at practice, though. Broncos have rested their main starters for the past 2 weeks, but they've kept Albert O out there regardless. He was even playing into the fourth quarter last week. With the starters, still the lead receiver, 10 snaps, 8 routes. Eric Tomlinson had 8 snaps, 1 route. Eric Saubert, 6 snaps, 1 route. It is going to be tough to rely on him, though, if we see Dulcich come in and take away just that main route stranglehold. So, Dwayne, I would take Albert O over Noah Fant. That's about the only nice thing I can say these days.
I think that's about all I can say at this point. Look, I mean, the talent profile, like we love. Again, and it was a small sample, but we at least knew there was a chance, right, that he could turn into one of these guys at the top. But again, just kind of following the consistent drum beat, the breadcrumbs, like keep picking them up. It's not leading into anywhere good right now for Albert O. Like I don't even remember what story that was from. I think Hansel and Gretel. I don't know what happens to anyone, but like Albert O would be getting eaten like by a monster or something in this story. So, yeah, it's not good. I mean, 65% route participation, is not it's not good. It's not terrible, right? It's not 50%. Last week he was at 30%. Even though he was on the field. And so like they're definitely he's in the doghouse is my gut. Like I feel like they're just trying to teach this guy a lesson, and they're trying to show him like, look, you got to step up or we're going to move on. And to your point, we haven't even seen Greg Dulcich in a game. You see, so once he's out there, like we've got Tomlinson, we've got Saubert, like handling all the 21 personnel stuff, just like we saw Mercedes Lewis do back in the day with Green Bay. We just talked about this problem for Kolkamet. Remember, you have two folks from that old Green Bay coaching staff. One went to Chicago, and now we're talking about the Broncos with Nathaniel Hackett, and they seem very committed to keeping the better run blocking tight end on the field in their 21 personnel. And so we haven't seen Albert O be able to get on the field because of that, number one. Then number two, we still have not seen Dulcich, who they spent a nice draft pick on. So, yeah, I think at this point, you just have to continue to move Albert O down your board. Playing in a really deep tight end premium league, and you can get Albert O in like over at FFPC, and you're looking up and you see Albert O in round 15 or 16. Yeah, I'd still take a swing on him, just see what happens week one. But it's very specific to that format. Otherwise, folks really just shouldn't be drafting Albert O anymore.
When we're doing like our April ranks next year, Dwayne, I want two other columns, one of which is like, was there a play caller or main coaching staff change? And then is the guy like coming off an ACL injury? Because to me, those are two, not even ACL, hip, whatever. Like, did their season end on injury? Like, we need to keep in mind that they could be on the pup, because to me, those are the two things, throughout the offseason that we end up seeing overlooked a lot. We, fall in love with what the guy did last year instead of looking forward to what
to be fair to you. I mean, you brought up the new coaching staff challenges. Like,
I'm not saying we ignored them. I just think it's really important to remind ourselves of that with a lot of these guys. Same thing it's not every situation where it goes that way. I was concerned with Herbert and Madison's role in new coaching staff, and really with the preseason usage we've seen, I'm no longer.
Yeah, it can go either way. It can go either way. But
it's
again, like you're just kind of setting yourself up so that when you get that first preseason data point, like you've already thought through everything. If it goes one way, like you have a better grasp on it. If it goes another, I think it gives you context, Ian. Context matters.
With that, we're going to take a quick break here to pay some bills. Our newest partner is revolutionizing the world of sports betting and fan engagement by making sports fandom profitable. That company is Symbol, the stock market for sports. Symbol, Simbull, was a PFF sponsor last year, and they are back for this football season. Symbol helps you trade pro and college teams like stocks and even earn cash dividend payouts when your teams win. Symbol took the thrill of sports betting and combined it with the profitability of the stock market to give you a platform where fortune favors the fan. Download the Symbol mobile app for iOS by searching Simbull in the App Store and use code, wait for this one, Dwayne, use code Ian, IAN, code Ian, not code Dwayne. That's code Ian to receive a free team stock valued up to $150 upon signing up. The PFF team is even getting in the Symbol market themselves this season. Create a free account, enter code Ian to get a free stock valued up to $150 to compete against the PFF Forecast podcast this season on Symbol. Again, not code Dwayne, code Ian over with Symbol. Gotta love it. Also, if you haven't heard by now, Underdog Fantasy is the best and easiest place to play fantasy football this summer. We've all been there in Fantasy Football League. Sunday morning, you're digging through news reports, trying to figure out whether to start your sub wide receiver that tweaked his hamstring last week, or you have a player on your team who hasn't been getting in the end zone, and then 1 week he suddenly goes off for 30 points on your bench. Underdog Fantasy, all the stress of who to start each week is lifted off your shoulders because it's best ball. Draft your teams before the season starts and get the best score in your lineup each and every week. Right now, you can draft an Underdog's Best Ball Mania 3 tournament to take your shot at $10 million in total prizes. Plus, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code PFF. And if you play 10 of those dollars using promo code PFF, you get a free PFF subscription. Underdog drafts close before NFL kickoff. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to UnderdogFantasy.com or the App Store. Play $10 with code PFF and draft your Best Ball Mania team today. Shout out to DraftKings. Get ready for the NFL Week 1 action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Bet just $5 on any football game and get $200 in free bets instantly. And now everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. Get up 7, you win. Bet on any NFL team of your choice, and if your team leads by 7 points at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team loses. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place just a $5 bet on any football game. That's code PFF only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for terms and resources. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In New York, call 877-8 HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. One per new customer, minimum $5 deposit and wager, $200 issued as 8 $25 free bets. Dwayne, last year I went like weeks saying Hoppany instead of HOPE-NY. I'm happy I got that one figured out.
I forgot about Hoppany.
I think someone just messaged me.
Kind of like hominy. It's kind of like, it sounds like it should be a vegetable.
Sometimes you just feel like the biggest idiot in the world, and that was one of those times. Final one, everyone. Just quick shout out to Manscaped, the leader in below the waist grooming. Now trust them with the whole shebang. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF. Again, that's 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. It's time you enjoy the finer things in life and get yourself a platinum package for your platinum package. Kansas City, if the Dameon Pierce storyline was dominating Twitter, my goodness, I have not seen nerds get more worked up over a snap rate than Travis Kelce. And look, I'm a nerd. I use that term freaking trying to just be funny, but I am firmly with the nerd crew, so I'm not trying to hate all you guys. But Travis Kelce, the snaps were not what we wanted. He was out there rotating. Fortson was out there. Tight ends that you probably never even heard of were out there playing alongside Travis Kelce with the first-team offense. Will Kelce even get 60 targets this year, Dwayne? Will you take Kelce in a normal 12-team league at any point in the draft? All jokes aside, I do think, beyond – all right, him splitting snaps in the preseason isn't that big of a deal. But as our lovely preseason, usage expert Nathan Yonke has pointed out, this has been a trend over the course of the last, 3 or 4 regular seasons. We shouldn't necessarily assume that Kelce at this age, at this point, in his career is going to be out there running a route on 90% plus of Mahomes' dropbacks. And if we see that rate drop just a little bit, we could see him really struggle to kind of produce that end of the first round, just value that he needs to do. So for me, it's not anything like he's still my overall tight end 1. If you want to have Mark Andrews there, I think there's an argument for that as well. I just dropped him a tick in the ranks, Dwayne. This is kind of how I've been treating it in drafts anyway, but tight end premium aside, if my top 6 running backs, CMC, Taylor, Henry, Eckler, Cook, Najee, and the top 6 wide receivers, Jefferson, Kupp, Chase, Diggs, Lamb, and Adams, if those guys are off the board at the turn, I'm fine taking Kelce, with the first pick of the second round. I'm probably not going to go out of my way to get too much more of him. Otherwise, how do you feel about, again, this hot topic of the Travis Kelce first team snaps?
Yeah, that's pretty much how I'd already been treating him, just because I just wanted the younger players that were going to get similar workload, even though, he was going to have an advantage based on the position. But also, we've loved Kyle Pitts in round 3. So like when you start stepping back layers, like and thinking about the way you want to plan out your draft and the fact that you can get Kittle and Waller at discounts this year, I don't have a lot of Kelce, period. I've got him, I think, on maybe like 3 or 4 teams out of almost 100 that I've drafted. So it hasn't been so much him or this. It's been the players around him. Like I just never want to take him over Stephon Diggs, as an example. I don't really want to take him over Devontae Adams.
Oh, no.
I mean, I've had drafts where I've taken CeeDee Lamb over Travis Kelce. But what are you talking about? Gus Edwards? I know. Yeah, no. I'm sorry, Ian.
I don't care about that. Auden Tate got cut.
Oh man, Gus Edwards goes on the PUP reserve, so he'll miss 4 games, and Auden Tate all in one day. I'm sorry, Ian. So it's a lot to take in. But with Kelce, to the point Nathan had, like his route participation over the last 4 years have dropped 95%, 92%, 81%, 77%. I don't think it's going to drop to 60%. I don't think it's going to drop to 50% because that's where it is right now in the preseason. I think it's still going to be in around 80% when the season gets going. Because it's a team that we have to remember also still lost who? Tyreek Hill. Like, so Kelce's going to get his. I think, the way you laid it out is exactly how I'm thinking. Just not taking him over those other players. But once they're gone, I think Kelce's still fine.
Audent to the Cowboys or we ride. I'm moving on. Okay, one other quick thing in Kansas City. We did see Justin Watson play well ahead of Skyy Moore. It's noticeable, man. This was a game with Juju Smith-Schuster missing time with a knee injury. Andy Reid did say it's not going to be an issue. He expects him to be ready to go for week 1, but we got Juju and MVS locked in as the top 2 wide receivers. If we have Justin Watson making things complicated for Skyy Moore in a game that also have Mecole Hardman sidelined with a groin injury, it could be problematic for his early season upside. But, Dwayne, it's one of these things. And similar, like we're talking about Treylon Berks here next as well. Like, I agree. Skyy Moore and Treylon Berks. Like, I would not feel good about starting them week 1, let alone maybe even the first month of the season. But that's the case a lot of times with these rookies. We mocked the Justin Jefferson stuff, but he really wasn't someone to feel good about starting until week 3, week 4. A.J. Brown had 100 yards in his first NFL game and played behind Tajay Sharp and Adam Humphries the next week. Like, this isn't exactly a new phenomenon for these first and even second round wide receivers, just not to immediately be working with the starters. How did you kind of adjust the ranks, or how are you planning on adjusting the ranks with Watson being a bigger factor than perhaps we anticipated?
Yeah, I mean, you can move more down a little bit, but at the end of the day, like when you're taking players like Garrett Wilson, you're taking players like Skyy Moore, you're really trying to think about the season outlook, right? Not just week 1, because once you get to that point in your draft, you're really swinging for upside. And what you have to be okay with is that upside doesn't always come in week 1, right? I mean, really, you want access to these, with Moore, obviously you want access to the Chiefs offense. And yeah, well, we love Skyy Moore to be running, with all the starters. And he did play with the starters, to be fair. He was out there he was in a route on 55% of Patrick Mahomes' dropback. So some people kind of like overstate, like, oh my God, he wasn't even out there. He was out there with Mahomes. So, I mean, he's still playing. He's just mixing in. Right now, I would expect if the season started tomorrow, it's going to be a rotation outside, between Mecole Hardman, Justin Watson, Skyy Moore. So to your point, you're not going to be able to start him. But my expectation, based on everything we know about Skyy Moore, would still be by like week 3, 4, 5. He's taking over that every down role. And so depending on the size of your league really matters, right? If you're playing in an 8-team league and you guys don't have very deep benches, then great. Maybe Skyy Moore isn't a great pick, because whoever drafts him is probably going to drop him. Like after week 2, they're just going to drop. I don't know this Skyy Moore guy. I can't use him. They're going to pick up the next running back that's available because the starter got hurt. And so there's going to be opportunities to go get some of these guys later. But if you're drafting in a deep bench league, like, you still want to stack your deck with as many of these types of players. So yeah, while he may drop down maybe around an ADP, I would not make Skyy Moore a fade. All I would do is I would just adjust with ADP, right? If ADP is going to give me Skyy Moore later now, then I'm just going to take Skyy Moore later.
Right now, Treylon Berks, wide receiver 47 Underdog Fantasy, officially behind Robert Woods. I have made that move as well. Man, I guess my thing for Berks, Dwayne, we know he's got to work his way into the starting lineup. Once he gets there, it's not going to be great volume. We've seen that in this run-first offense. And so we basically need him to beat out Nick Westbrook-Ikhine at some point, which, okay, maybe that happens a month into the season. Great. And then there's still a chance that Robert Woods is going to be a number 1 pass game option. It could happen. Let's say Burks overcomes that and he's getting 8 targets a game. But then we need him to be really freaking efficient on those 8 targets per game, just like A.J. Brown was, in order for him to really turn to a sort of wide receiver that we're going to be wanting to bet on over someone with just a better offensive environment and with a better workload. Right now, I have Burks down to wide receiver 55. It's one of these things, man, where, yeah, we can have a constant drumbeat, a trail of crumbs going in a positive direction, but can also be going off the freaking table. Unfortunately, that's what's happened with Treylon Berks.
It could lead off the cliff, into a ravine. Yeah. So with Berks, I honestly, I'm treating it the same way that I did with Moore, but with the caveat that with Moore, we've still had a lot of positive news, right? Yeah, he's not. We would hope he would be the starting wide receiver 3 by now on the Chiefs, but we've had enough other positive news. He's still in the mix. He's out there playing with the starters. With Treylon Berks, yeah, he's out there playing with the starters, but he doesn't start the game, and he plays until the 4th quarter. Like, this is clearly a player that they are sending a message that, like, you've got to get your stuff together, dude. And so we know Mike Vrabel, kind of a hard-nosed coach. Like, it could be a situation where very easily you're having to drop Treylon Berks off of a lot of teams in that first month. Having said all that, like, with him sliding, the way he is, if I had to continue to pay a 7th or an 8th round pick to get Treylon Berks, I wouldn't do it, right? But now, like, when you look at it, even over on FFPC, where people are pretty aggressive with the way they draft, like, you can get him in around 11. He's dropping down in around 12. Like, there's been a couple drafts over the last couple days. Around 10 and 11 is where he's going, but he's dropped into around 12, even in a couple of these drafts. So by that point, right, once you get to that range, like there's a lot of wide receivers, that you really aren't going to like anymore on your board. There are some moving up, like we talked about with Isaiah McKenzie and some of these other guys. So I think Burks is going to still be in play in a deep bench format like that. Playing in a more shallow league, you're going to have to be more careful with Treylon Berks, and you just definitely don't want to be reaching, for him. So that's the main thing to remember. Just know that ADP is moving, it's adjusting. So if you still want to be in on Treylon Berks, that's fine. But whatever you do, don't keep taking him where you've been taking him all along. You got to let him slide to his new ADP.
Kenyon Drake looks like he has officially been released. It was all but confirmed yesterday, and Rap Sheet came out and I believe just went ahead and said the deed has been done. They weren't able to trade him because of the nice little contract figure he managed to get for himself. And I love the is it Josephina Anderson, the ESPN reporter? She had an interview with Kenyon Drake, and Drake was basically like, I'm at peace with the situation. I'm getting paid, regardless of what happens. And that's what you love there. As one Conor McGregor once said, they love you one week, they hate you next. Just make sure you get paid both weeks. So Kenyon Drake, again, someone that is probably going to be a nuisance wherever he lands, Dwayne, in terms of just him taking away from someone else in fantasy. Certainly at this point, someone that you are not drafting in leagues of all shapes and sizes. I don't think it's necessarily great news for Josh Jacobs either, though. If anyone should be getting a bump on this, it's Zamir White. The problem is this is another three-headed committee, man. Jacobs, Zamir White, and Amir Abdullah should all be out there. And if we've learned anything from these Patriots backfields over the year, which is basically how we're treating the Raiders now with Josh McDaniels there, we want the pass down back. I've said this before. Damon Harris scores 15 touchdowns. He was the RB20 in PPR points per game. LeGarrette Blount scores 18 touchdowns. He was the RB15. It's been the Shane Vereens and James Whites of the world that have actually been the ones putting up big-time numbers. Now, those offenses didn't have Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and Darren Waller involved, so I'm not saying Amir Abdullah is going to be that guy. How are you addressing this backfield, Dwayne? Is the answer just no? I still certainly don't want Josh Jacobs. I'm warming up to, I guess, the idea of Zamir White in the later rounds, though. Like, Zamir White could easily just be, at this point, cheap Brian Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, Zamir White is the handcuff to Jacobs. He's going to spell Jacobs from time to time. Jacobs is playing the Damien Harris role. Look, all the data points that we've got so far point to this, that this is going to be just like a New England backfield. And then when you look at the archetype of backs that we've got that, Josh McDaniels has assembled, and it really just screams this. And so, yeah, with Kenyon Drake out of the way, the biggest, the player that helps them out the most is Amir Abdullah, because Kenyon Drake has been pretty good on passing downs in the past. So I think this means Amir Abdullah is going to be playing that James White role. You can get him still right now, like even over in FFPC, like he's, going right around round 15. Sometimes he's round 14, sometimes he's round 16. But I mean, this is a 20, if you're drafting, 20 players, I think round 15 is plenty fair, right, on a player like Abdullah, especially depending on how you've constructed your roster, right? If you maybe went hero RB and then you missed, maybe that tier of upside pass catching explosive players that we talk about a lot, that has Patterson and Chase Edmonds and all those guys in it. Say for whatever reason those guys went early and you missed, you had to take a couple of swings on really guys like Darrell Henderson, guys like that we don't know for sure how much role they're going to have. They have a lot of upside. But then being able to come back later and getting a guy like Amir Abdullah, like he could fill in, like, and be your RB2, like for a few weeks. So he kind of could look like a JD McKissick for you, but you're getting him at a discount versus where JD McKissick goes. So yeah, I think Abdullah is the main one. I also agree with you on Zamir White. This just clears things up that if something does happen to Jacobs, we know Zamir White will be the clear early down back, handling more of the load. He could have some standalone value here and there, but I don't think you're ever going to feel comfortable starting Zamir White unless there is an injury to Josh Jacobs, or if somehow Zamir White just overtakes Josh Jacobs. But I also agree with what your thoughts are on, where we should be taking him. If you look at White right now, he's climbed around 12, in an FFPC draft. So compared to where you got to take, Robinson in round 8 or 9, I think, that's a good comp. You're essentially getting a very similar player to what you're getting with Robinson. Maybe not quite as much of a, I think there's a little more chance Robinson is really just in a two-way split between him and McKissick, but is it enough of a chance that we should be taking Zamir White's going 4 rounds after him? Probably not. I think it's an arbitrage play, and I think you named the perfect person. Zamir White's arbitrage on Brian Robinson and his new ADP.
By the way, a couple other guys where if your draft goes long enough and you just need to fill up spots and you see someone like Amir Abdullah sitting there, Ty Montgomery could very well be that guy in New England. And also Dontrell Hilliard does project as, maybe not the full-time pass down back in Tennessee, but he has been getting a lot of rest alongside Derrick Henry while they trot out Hassan Haskins and Julius Chestnut. I cannot get this guy's name right. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I think you got the chestnut
right?
part right. You got the chestnut part right. I don't have Tennessee in front of me. Like I think it's right.
It's Julius Chestnut. Hell yeah. I got this shit. I'm a professional, Dwayne.
Yeah, it is Julius Chestnut. Yeah, it's Julius Chestnut.
Okay, two more, everyone, before we really get off the rails here. Isaiah Spiller unfortunately suffered an ankle injury. Will miss the final preseason game. There is a quote-unquote chance he will miss the opener as well, per Chargers head coach Brandon Staley. Seemingly still behind Joshua Kelly. At this point, it's really tough to expect standalone value for Spiller. I'm worried, Dwayne, that the Chargers go ahead and add a veteran running back here at some point before the season. Not a given by any stretch, but I just wonder with Justin Jackson now signing with the Lions, will they really be comfortable if Spiller's banged up going in with Kelly and Roundtree behind Austin Eckler? Because Lord knows we talked about just some of the underlying metrics that really paint a picture of just how bad Kelly and Roundtree have been. With Spiller, Dwayne, how far have you kind of moved him down? For me, it is something where I think guys like Jamal Williams and especially Brian Robinson obviously deserve to be going higher at this point. Spiller, though, still, if we got an Eckler injury, just for that potential upside alone, he still projects as, the best handcuff option.
Yeah, I moved Spiller below Jamal Williams as well last week. I don't know that I'm going to drop him more. I'm going to have to think about it, and decide what I'm going to do here tonight with the ranks. But if I'm making a long-term bet on who I think has the best, opportunity to really back up Austin Eckler, play some snaps, and if Austin Eckler went down and really has the most value, I think, by week 5 or 6 this year, it's still probably Spiller. But at the same time, knowing that he hasn't been able to overtake Roundtree or Kelly, who just haven't been impressive players, in their NFL careers, that means that Spiller's probably really showing nothing, or he's got some sort of flaw, right? That's really fatal, whether it's pass pro, whatever it is, that where the coaches just really aren't wanting to get him out there. Now we got to deal with the ankle injury. He's week to week. That's not always a good tag to have on you. Yeah. The week to week. So we don't know. This could be a month, it could be 5 weeks, but at the end of the day, it's going to hurt Spiller. It's going to set him back because he's not out there able to practice and able to really battle for the number 2 spot. Okay, Ian, what's the new breaking news?
It's just hate Ian Hartitz Day because now Chris Herndon got released, Dwayne. Everyone I love is getting released.
I'm just going to log off now, and you can just sit on here and go,
there's a realistic chance that Duke Johnson is coming in 5 more minutes, man. This is this is not as great day to be great.
Good news. CPAT just playing the first snap of the first 2 games. They got CPAT and bubble wrap. He's the dude in Atlanta. So you can always hold on to that, Ian.
Do you see the Justin Herbert quote on Spiller?
No.
Justin Herbert was asked how he sees Isaiah Spiller fitting into the Chargers offense, and his response was, hopefully at running back. Some of the quotes we've gotten here have been pretty great. The Austin Eckler, he's been really attentive during meetings, and people legitimately trying to run with that as good news.
Hey, I will say, does this potentially just make Eckler have to play more? Because we've talked about the other 2 guys. They're not very good.
Yeah. And
if the Chargers are in competitive game scripts, I can see games where they're winning, it doesn't really matter, right? You can let a Josh Kelly, you can let, a Larry Roundtree come out there and salt it away. But it does make me wonder, if Spiller can't take a step forward, might Eckler have to take on a little bit more than what he's hoping for? Because Eckler's pretty much said he'd like to limit himself to around 50% of the carries. But we could see Eckler push more towards 60, 65%, depending on the way the game scripts go and who they need to have on the field. Because if you're in a tight game or if you're losing, you don't want Larry Roundtree or Joshua Kelly out there. That's a wasted touch.
Final one. Again, preseason performance doesn't really matter. But Isaiah Likely, dog, man, he's been awesome. 29 routes this preseason, caught all 12 of his targets, 144 yards, touchdown, 4 contested catches, 7 avoided tackles, 3 explosive plays. His targets per route run, Dwayne, 41.4%. Not bad there. I'm not certain he's gonna be able to maintain that with Andrews and Bateman back in the picture. But you look at this offense, and what have we heard all offseason? They want to party like it's 2019 again, and then taking, the pair of 4th-round tight ends, I think really showed that. And when you go back to 2019, this was the number 3 offense in the league in terms of total dropbacks with at least 2 tight ends on the field. We had Andrews working as the clear-cut number 1 that year, 98 targets. Nick Boyle, though, 43 targets behind him, and Hayden Hurst had 39. So this is a situation where barely ever Barely ever do we get the two tight ends balling out in the same year. In fact, since 2010, the only times that teams have had multiple top 12 tight ends in the same season were Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. And then like 2018 or 19, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert got it. That one was even kind of funky. It was more because like both guys got hurt for a small stretch and each finished as a low end tight end one. So I don't think Likely's going to have much standalone value, but man, Dwayne, he's certainly on the rise here just by virtue of being a really good player. And again, I like to go back to what our PFF draft guide says about some of these players, because I don't have this perfect memory and analysis in my mind already of every single rookie to come into the league. So let's fall back on some of the guys that have been watching them a lot longer than I have. So this is from Mike Renner in our 2022 NFL draft guide. Where Likely wins, his natural receiving ability. Likely is one heck of a natural receiver. He attacks the ball so well in the air, can create on his own after the catch. What's his role? Move tight end. This is the tricky thing. He's not quite dynamic enough to pass as a receiver, not big enough to be respected as a tight end. He's a move tight end in the league that doesn't use them anymore. Where he can improve size, this one is obvious. Likely has to get bigger. The big question is, can he? He's almost indistinguishable from a wide receiver on tape with his frame. He's in no man's land at the tight end position at his current weight. Seems like very fair concerns from Mike, but my goodness, just based on the uses we've seen, based on the landing spot, and based on their not being, I mean, the Ravens just signed DeMarcus Robinson for crying out loud, and he could feasibly start in 3 wide receiver sets. Like, that's the point we're at in this passing game. What are your thoughts on Likely, man? I moved him up to tight end 24. Maybe that's a little aggressive. Move him down to, and I'm not drafting my tight end 24 9 times. Freaking 19 times out of 20, Dwayne. So I'm not saying that he's this guy we need to really be up on, but my goodness, man, the waiver wire madness that's going to go on if Mark Andrews gets hurt. Like, there's at least a ceiling for this guy now, one that we didn't really know existed a month ago.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument now, like if you're playing in a tight end premium league and you're in round 20 and, you know, maybe you're not happy with your tight end room, maybe instead of Trey McBride, you're throwing a dart on Likely, right? Being the guy that if for some reason the starter goes down, what do you get? But I mean, in the first 2 preseason games, he had, well, week 1, he had an 83.6 PFF receiving grade, which is really good. And then he had a 96.9 PFF receiving grade this last week. So out there for 77% of Tyler Huntley's dropbacks. So yeah, I mean, to me, he looks like the handcuff, you know, to Andrews. I don't think he'll be able to be on the field that much with Andrews unless they truly know it's a passing play, because he's not really a good blocker, right? And when the Ravens use their multiple tight ends with Nick Boyle, you know, some of the other guys that they work in, like, they like to have guys out there that can really block in the run game. So I think that, to your point, is going to kind of limit him. It's going to make it hard for him to have any standalone value. But to your point, like, if something happens with Andrews, or if it's just he keeps doing this and they finally just have to make a decision that, well, crap, we're just going to have to change our offense, like, to get this guy out here more. Maybe they, you know, play him more at wide receiver or something. I don't know. Talent has outs is the main thing. So yeah, I'm going to have to move him up as well. Like, I think I had him at like 30 or something like that before. I think 24 probably sounds about right.
Again, from that awesome fantasy football, all 32 teams, most impactful developments from training camp article that you can find at The Athletic. Jeff Zurbeck, Rybeck, sorry if I mispronounced that. Jeff's an awesome reporter, though. He mentioned Likely won't get the volume of Andrews, but with fellow rookie tight end Charlie Kolar expected to miss the start of the season and the Ravens short on wide receivers, he figures to play significant snaps from the jump. It's one of these rare situations, Dwayne. We almost never assume the running back is going to get snaps in the slot. We almost never assume that the number 2 tight end is going to be meaningful. We almost never assume the day 3 running back is going to have an immediate role. Sometimes, though, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Wow, that's a good outro, Ian. All right, Dwayne, we freaking got it. 14 major things to adjust the ranks with after preseason week 2. We got one more week of preseason, and then it's like official fantasy football draft week. I'm sure plenty of you guys have your drafts coming up this weekend as well. Dwayne, what do you have coming out this week? Or what should I say? What are you republishing this week just to help get back in the center of everyone? Because, you know, again, we've been doing this all year long. So if there is anything, I know some of you have mentioned wanting to hear about auction and stuff like that. So we can try to take a little bit of time. But if there's anything you guys like really want to hear from us that you haven't or you forget about, you know, in these last few weeks, please let us know, because it's tough for us to sometimes remember exactly what you guys, remember from a couple months ago and what you don't. So Dwayne, what do you got on PFF.com this week?
Yeah, so the utilization takeaways from week 2 will drop tomorrow. Obviously, Nathan's stuff is good too. It's just I go back through it all, look more at the targets per route. I mean, not targets per route, but routes run per drop back. A lot of other things because Nathan's trying to hit it quickly on the night that it happens. So more of a deep dive so folks can check out the utilization stuff. That always does. People seem to always like that. And then as you mentioned, like just going back and reworking all the ranks, all the tiers, making sure they're all updated because we know this is the biggest draft weekend of the season. And so that everybody has all the things that they need to go dominate.
I had my 12 sleepers to consider in later rounds come out on Monday. Also, Dwayne and I already podcasted about the defense you need to draft in 2022. Even got a kicker article out there, my ultimate fantasy football kicker breakdown that I guarantee you can read in about 2 seconds. Also, players fit at ADP. Takeaways from preseason week 2. Always a great day to be great over at pff.com. And once again, check out that PFF Plus subscription. Get the free week. Get ready for your drafts, guys. This is the best product we have. This is basically our new look draft guide. Again, you can sign up for your free trial today over at pff.com. You're going to get our version of just basically the modern fantasy football draft guide, rankings, analysis, strategy, live updates, interactive, scoring just based on your league setting, floor, median, and ceiling fantasy point projections. And again, just our draft strategy mode, which is our best effort to just basically be there for you guys and help assist you, with your draft each and every round along the way. For Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.